What is going on, everybody? Taylor here.
Hello, I'm Jacob.
And we are going to attempt to do a movie review today because apparently we can't do technology anymore or anything. So
my hair keeps falling in front of my face.
It's gonna be a real one today, guys. We're gonna talk about respect.
Yes. I apparently have none for you with the way I'm setting all of this up. So.
Respect is a good word of the day to reflect upon. So what did you think of Respect?
I thought this movie sucked.
You have gotten unkinder and unkinder every time I ask you about this movie. Your opinion seems to go down.
The more and more I think about this movie, the more and more it just goes, nah, this movie was bad. This movie was really bad. It decided that we're going to go for 2.5 hours, which, again, instant no. There are very few movies that have ever justified being 2.5 hours. This is not one of them. And then not only did you go 2.5 hours, in that 2.5 hours, you told me nothing about who Aretha Franklin is.
Like you said, it was basically Wikipedia the movie.
Yeah.
But even with it being Wikipedia the movie, it was very much like, I don't even know if Wikipedia is the right word, because it was all very surface level. You didn't actually really get many details about her life.
No, and that was my biggest problem with it, is we follow the life of Aretha Franklin. Quite literally, the life of Aretha Franklin up until the release of Amazing Grace. And they're just so surface level. It's just, then this happened, and nothing is being said about who she is as a person. Nothing is being said about what this means for greater society. What work did she do for the Black community?
It's very much. She is not an active participant in her own story through a lot of the movie. It's a lot of things happening to her rather than her having any sort of agency. There are moments where she does, but it feels like it's a whole movie of things just happening to her. And we don't really get to see, we kind of see her deal with some of the fallout of some of it, but it's mostly just like, this happens to her and then we move on, and then this happens to her and then we move on. And it feels so, it's really sad actually, because there's a lot of very traumatic, very interesting places that you could take this movie instead of just kind of skimming over the unfortunate things, terrible, awful things that she's been through and that have been done to her. You just kind of skim them and then you move on, and you don't really get to sit with them.
No, there's moments in this movie where they set things up and you're like, okay, so they're going to bring that back and that'll wrap into the third act. And it never does. And at one point blames her for a lot of things, which made me uncomfortable with what the decisions they made of who they're blaming for a lot of things that happen. And there's other decisions there's scenes that happen in the movie and moments in her life that they go, and then this happened. We're not going to show you the impact of her choices. And that, I think, is my biggest problem, is no time in the movie does she make a choice and we see the consequences of that choice.
Yeah, because we see the consequences of the things that happen to her, not the decisions necessarily that she's making. But I think another bigger problem that doesn't necessarily help this problem is that they're trying to do her entire life in one movie. And that's something that I often have a problem with when we're trying to make movies about people's lives. It's very, very hard to package someone's entire existence, usually, which is about 80 years, 60 years of film, of life into one film.
Yeah.
And that's very difficult to do. And I just wish they maybe would have taken like a 5-10 year gap even, or even a couple of weeks, but pinpointed a specific narrative that they were trying to get, because by the end of it, I didn't have she went through this particular journey, or I feel like it's circled back from this one point that we spent with her. It just was them trying to tell you about her entire life, skim across the top of as much as they could. And I just don't feel like it had a narrative focus. There was nothing I didn't walk out of the movie and go, this is what I feel like they wanted me to get out of it.
Yeah, and that comes down to my biggest issue with this film, is that at the end of it, I've spent a 2.5-hour movie with Aretha Franklin, and I have no idea what the director was trying to tell me about Aretha Franklin.
Yeah.
Yep. Jennifer Hudson is incredible.
She's great.
I thought she's very good in the movie as Franklin. I know
yeah, I think she's great.
She does a great job and I think the entire cast actually do a fantastic job with the material they're given. I just think it's a very poorly directed, poorly written film.
I don't necessarily disagree. I think that it, we walked out of the film and I went on to Wikipedia to have a look and try and glean a little bit of, I guess, clarity on a lot of things that I just didn't feel like the film gave us. It alluded to a lot of things. It briefly touched on a lot of things. But I left that film feeling like we didn't need Martin Luther King in it.
Yeah.
Which I know probably sounds crazy, but with the way that it didn't have a clear narrative of what it was trying to say about her life and who she was, it just felt like either that story was shoehorned in or everything else was shoehorned in. Like it just didn't have, because by the end of it, when you're reflecting on her life, the movie didn't tell me why that was impactful for her to know him and to do, like, we don't see any of the activist work that she's really done other than singing a couple of times, but there's no real, I don't have a connection to any of that.
And that's my problem with a lot of the show, because there's a lot of moments like that why did you include this? Because Wikipedia at this point said that that's in her life, because at some point that happened, so we've included it. And it's like, well, narrative wise, that doesn't work. And I think that's the problem with this movie, and that's my issue. Well,
and I also kind of had an issue with how even the songs were used and framed in a lot of the film, excuse me. There's one scene in particular that I really liked, which is the one where she's writing the song, where she goes to this new studio. I don't want to spoil anything for everyone, but she goes to a new studio in a smaller town that's not New York City, and they put together this song, and it's a really cool way for you to hear the song. But a lot of the ways that the music is used in the film just feels...
No, I get what you're saying.
It feels like it's just kind of in there because it has to be. There are some moments that are great with the music and some that I just feel like kind of stops the story.
Yeah, I mean, for the first half of the movie, there isn't really. Like, for the first half, which is obviously like the build-up to Respect, which is the song, and then suddenly and then it goes, oh, okay, here is the other 10 ones that you know. Like, this is the other big famous ones, and they just go bang, 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 up until Amazing Grace. And that didn't work for me. The second half of the film is very much just, you've heard this, you've heard this, you've heard this, you've heard this. They don't use the music, and they don't use her concert scenes, which, again, it's a musical biopic, so you're going to have the concert scenes. They don't try and use those to say anything.
There's only one song that really does for me, that does that, where it's actually like a story narrative moment. And I really appreciate it. I think you know what I'm talking about. But everything else was just kind of thrown in there because it's like, oh, you know, obviously Respect has to be in here, but then there's other stuff that you know too that we're just gonna kind of put in, and you know, you'll know it. Something I do want to touch on briefly, we've kind of touched on it already, but there's a lot of dark themes in this film, which could have been a very different film if they would have chosen to actually dive into any of them beyond just kind of mentioning that they happened. But it's very, and I think that might be why I have issues with trying to figure out the focus and the tone of the film, is like, to me, this movie was completely joyless. Completely joyless. And I know that there were a lot of traumatic things that were done to her. There's a lot of things she went through that are horrible. But it just even in, you know, there just didn't seem to be moments highlighted at all in the entire film where she was ever happy or where she ever felt like she had achieved anything, or there were just no moments of levity or joy. Like the whole time I just felt like it was joyless.
Yeah.
And I hate that.
Yeah.
I hate that. Like there was no crescendo of a moment where there was no build up to like a happier moment. There was no, do you get what I'm trying to say?
No, I get
like,
you.
It just felt very
like the whole
note.
movie. Yeah. And that's an issue I have with it as well. Like, it's the film doesn't give you, again, I keep going back to it. The film doesn't give you anything that it's trying to say about Aretha Franklin. And that's a problem I have with it.
But yeah, I don't know. I hadn't heard great things going into the film, but I was kind of hoping, you know, that I would come out with something other than Jennifer being great, because she is. Audrey has a very small role, but she's fantastic as the mother in the film. She's wonderful. A lot of the cast is wonderful.
Yeah, I think I don't think there's a bad performance in it. I think everyone's trying their best. I just think it's poorly directed and it's poorly written.
I agree. I think the lack of focus really hurt the film in a lot of ways. But what did you guys think of the film? If you've seen it, if you haven't, are you planning on seeing it? See it. Are you planning on see it? Yes. We're having a great day where technology is our friend and we can speak correctly and everything's fine. It's all great. But we would love to hear from you guys in the comments either way. Thank you guys so much for checking out this review. If you want to find us on social media, all of our links are down in the description. Link to our Patreon is down in the description where we're doing some exclusive content if you want to check that out. You guys are seriously the best for all of your support, and we will see you next time.
Bye.